Picture this, the Ides of March. The Senate floor hums with tension, though you dismiss it as the usual political discontent. As you enter, familiar faces surround you, their eyes sharp and unreadable. You barely register the first blow, a searing shock as metal pierces flesh. Another blade strikes, then another. Your chest tightens as the pain spreads, your breath coming in ragged gasps. Your mind churns, betrayal, confusion, anger. Was this your destiny? Darkness begins to close in, yet one thought remains clear. What would Rome become without you to lead it? In the immediate aftermath of Caesar's murder, chaos gripped Rome. The assassination, meant to restore the Republic, instead tore the city apart. Riots erupted as the public mourned their fallen leader, a man who had promised them stability and reform. The Senate, fractured and divided, struggled to regain control. Power-hungry figures like Mark Antony and Octavian quickly emerged, vying for dominance, plunging Rome into years of civil war. Far from improving the Republic, Caesar's death left Rome weaker and more divided than ever, teetering on the edge of collapse. But now, what if he was never murdered? Would Rome still suffer the same fate? Let's see if we can figure it out. Before we start, if you happen to enjoy this video and find value in it, I would greatly appreciate it if you left a like so that more people may be able to find it. Additionally, if you don't want to miss out on more videos, why not subscribe? That way you will be notified every time I upload a new video. Let's get started now, shall we? If Julius Caesar had survived the assassination attempt, Rome would likely have undergone rapid and sweeping changes within the first 5 years. Caesar, emboldened by his near-death experience, might have cracked down hard on his conspirators. Those directly involved, like Brutus and Cassius, would have been executed or exiled, sending a clear message to any who opposed him. Consolidating his power, Caesar could have solidified his transition from dictator to de facto monarch, possibly even accepting the title of king, a move he was already flirting with. Rome itself would likely have entered a period of centralized reform. Infrastructure projects would boom, more provinces would be granted citizenship, and the calendar he had introduced would be fully integrated. As for Cleopatra, their relationship might have evolved into a powerful political alliance. She could have been installed as a client ruler in Alexandria under Rome's protection, strengthening Caesar's grip on Egypt's wealth. However, such bold moves might have further alienated the traditional senatorial elite, risking underground resistance. Still, in the short term, Rome would have been more stable than the chaotic aftermath of his murder, with Caesar steering the Republic-turned-empire firmly under his singular vision. Egypt would likely have become a more deeply entrenched ally and economic asset to Rome. Cleopatra, as a client queen, would have maintained Egypt's autonomy on paper, but governed under Caesar's influence, ensuring a steady flow of grain, wealth, and resources to Rome. Egypt's prosperity would have surged under Roman protection, its trade routes and agricultural output booming. However, this dynamic could have placed a strain on Rome itself. Critics in the Senate, already wary of Caesar's perceived favoritism toward Cleopatra, would likely decry the growing dependence on Egyptian wealth and culture. While Caesar might have used Egypt's riches to fund his ambitious reforms and military campaigns, such reliance could have exacerbated tensions between Rome's elites and Caesar's centralized vision of power, sowing seeds of future unrest. If Caesar and Cleopatra's relationship endured, Egypt would likely have become a more deeply entrenched ally and economic asset to Rome. Cleopatra, as a client queen, would have maintained Egypt's autonomy on paper, but governed under Caesar's influence, ensuring a steady flow of grain, wealth, and resources to Rome. Egypt's prosperity would have surged under Roman protection, its trade routes and agricultural output booming. However, this dynamic could have placed a strain on Rome itself. Critics in the Senate, already wary of Caesar's perceived favoritism toward Cleopatra, would likely decry the growing dependence on Egyptian wealth and culture. While Caesar might have used Egypt's riches to fund his ambitious reforms and military campaigns, such reliance could have exacerbated tensions between Rome's elites and Caesar's centralized vision of power, sowing seeds of future unrest. By the end of the 5 years following the failed assassination attempt, Rome under Caesar's continued rule would have transformed significantly. Quick question. Do you consider yourself a creative person? Are you interested in building projects on the weekends? Or is it a way of life? Either way, I would like to introduce you to Ted's Woodworking. With this, you get access to 16,000 easy-to-follow woodworking plans. Nothing will be left to guesswork. You don't need a big workspace or expensive tools to get started. Whether you're an advanced craftsman or a complete beginner, these plans are perfect for any skill level. If that's something you would be interested in, I have a link where you can learn more in the description. Anyway, back to the video. Caesar, likely in his mid to late 50s, would still wield absolute power, having solidified his position through military victories and political reforms. His alliance with Egypt, bolstered by Cleopatra's influence and the wealth of the Nile, would have brought unprecedented prosperity to Rome. Grain shipments securing food stability and Egyptian trade enriching the economy. Monumental building projects funded by Egyptian resources might have reshaped the city itself, turning Rome into a gleaming center of culture and power. However, the alliance would not come without controversy. The traditional Roman elite, already resistant to Caesar's reforms, would grow increasingly resentful of Cleopatra's influence, perceiving it as a betrayal of Roman values. Whispers of Caesar planning to elevate Cleopatra and their potential son to positions of power could spark unrest, potentially leading to underground plots or even organized rebellion. Despite these tensions, the majority of Roman citizens, especially those in the lower classes, would likely support Caesar, benefiting from his reforms and the wealth pouring in from Egypt and his other conquests. If Caesar managed to avoid further conspiracies, he could live well into his 60s, possibly even initiating a succession plan to transition Rome into a monarchy officially, with himself as the first emperor. This might set the stage for a smoother transition of power, avoiding the chaos of the civil wars that historically followed his death. Ultimately, Rome could have entered an era of earlier stability and expansion, but it would hinge on Caesar's ability to maintain balance between his sweeping vision and the resistance of the old guard. After Caesar's death, the state of Rome would largely depend on the groundwork he laid for his succession. If Caesar had groomed a clear heir, likely his adopted son Octavian, later Augustus, or a potential child with Cleopatra, it could have prevented the political chaos that historically followed his assassination. Octavian, with Caesar's endorsement, might have risen to power even earlier, continuing his adoptive father's reforms and further solidifying the transition from republic to empire. Cleopatra's role in this scenario could also play a key part. If she remained an ally or co-ruler with their hypothetical child, Egypt might have stayed a vital and cooperative province under Roman influence. Rome would likely continue to prosper in the short term due to Caesar's centralized reforms, economic stability, and military expansion. His death, however, might still provoke power struggles, especially if factions within the Senate or military sought to reclaim authority. Octavian, known for his political shrewdness and ability to consolidate power, could quash such dissent, ensuring that Rome remained stable and avoided the bloody civil wars that historically followed Caesar's death. Ultimately, while Caesar's survival and reforms might delay the decline of Rome, the empire's eventual fall seems inevitable. Internal corruption, economic strain, overextension, and the growing pressures of managing such vast territories would still take their toll. However, under Caesar's successors, Rome might have enjoyed a longer golden age and a more gradual decline, leaving an even greater mark on history than it already did. While there is no way of actually knowing what would happen, it is still very interesting to think about. I know I'm about to hear about this, so I might as well clear it up right now. Julius Caesar, unlike Mark Antony, had a reputation for political pragmatism and an unshakable focus on his ambitions. While his relationship with Cleopatra would have been significant, Caesar's primary loyalty was always to Rome and his vision of its future. Unlike Antony, whose infatuation with Cleopatra led to reckless decisions and a loss of Roman support, Caesar's sharp intellect and political instincts would likely have ensured that their alliance served his goals rather than hers. Cleopatra may have been a valuable ally, but Caesar would have maintained control, using their partnership to strengthen Rome's position without compromising his authority or the loyalty of the Roman elite. That is why I believe that while Cleopatra would have benefited greatly from her relationship with Caesar, she wouldn't have the same effect as she did with Mark Antony. Until next time, let's all learn from history together and apply those lessons to our lives.